Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of 3D Espresso. So my name's Wes, and I'm a creative 3D evangelist here at Adobe. So I hope you have your coffee ready. It's probably early. For me, it's 11 a.m., but on the West Coast side, it's 8 a.m. Oddly enough, I don't actually drink coffee at all, so I've kind of wanted to try, but I've never really gotten into it. So if anybody has any good coffee suggestions for someone who's never really been into coffee, I'd love to give it a shot and see. But anyways, like I said, welcome to 3D Espresso's latest episode. So today we are going to be talking about After Effects and 3D. So I love these two topics. I could go on and on all day about this stuff. But anyways, I'm excited to get into it. So one of the things I also wanted to mention is that with the content that we're showing today, so I have a new course that's going to be coming out. You can view it on adobevideotraining.com, also on my YouTube channel, and should be pretty soon, a couple weeks hopefully. And it's going to be like a whole entire, everything you're seeing today, I go through step by step in a course over 3 videos. And one of the videos is a complete introduction to Substance Painter, which shows how I created the textures, the materials for the 3D models as well. So it's going to be super helpful for that. So with all that said, let's just jump right into it. So I'm going to switch over to my desktop here. I've got some buttons I need to press. So let me just do this quick transition here. And there we go. We are now looking at After Effects. So the first thing that I wanted to do is let me play this quick little example that you see here. So this is just a quick mock-up example of being able to take some 3D content and mix it into like some live action footage. So for the live action footage, this was actually shot by my coworker and good friend, Robert Herensky. So funny story, Robert was on his vacation. He went to this awesome beach place. He shot some footage. And the footage we used together in Adobe Max session that we did in 2024. So that's kind of what we're going to be taking a look at here. So thank you so much, Robert. It was awesome to work with you and get this footage from you. So what we're going to be looking at here is just kind of a quick workaround on, how can we take a 3D object and how can we put it into some track footage. But before we just get crazy and jump right into that, I'm going to show you just the ins and out basics of working with 3D and After Effects. So let's just jump right in and get started with that. So in this project, you'll see that I have over here this 3D folder, and I have some meshes here, or models, we'll say. So I have a phone GLB, and this is the model format that I can use in After Effects. Now, After Effects will also import FBX as well. However, GLB is going to be the best format to use because of, a couple factors. Number one, it will include all of your textures and materials that you've created. And then number two, it'll work with animated meshes as well. So pretty cool. All right, so to import 3D, it's super easy. You just go in and just do file import here, just as you would any other file, whether it be like a video or image, and just choose like the GLB file. So with this in place, I can just left click this model and I'm going to drag and drop it over a comp, and it's just going to add it to the comp window. So now we have a new comp and we have a new layer here with this 3D layer. And then we have this little transform gizmo widget thing right in the center. So what is going on? Well, first things first, let's take a look at how we can navigate the viewport. So here I'm holding down the Alter option, right mouse button, and I can just zoom in, and then Alter option, use my left mouse button, and I can orbit around. And check this out, I have this 3D model. And like I was telling you, because of the GLB, all of the materials that are associated with this model, they're all being viewed right here inside of After Effects. And this is actually quite awesome because you can see that, I'm actually getting this metal, some reflection and highlights. I can actually see some reflection here on this glass surface. And this is a full 3D model that I'm working with right here inside of After Effects. Pretty awesome. Now, before we go any further, the one thing I want to mention is, and you might be thinking this, okay, great, where do I get the 3D models? Well, let's just take a quick look at that here. So I'm going to jump over to my browser, and there's 2 things I'll mention. So first things first, if you're using Substance tools, you can go to the Substance 3D assets, and if we jump over to all assets and I click on models, we have tons and tons and tons of models in here, lots of stuff. Now, the caveat with these models is, as you can see, they're untextured. So, for example, if I wanted to look at, I don't know, let's say I'm doing some type of documentary on bees, right? And I have this bee house and I want to bring it in and maybe just rotate, do some graphic stuff, some infographics things. I can do that. You can just download here as FBX. I believe this also works as a GLB as well, except unfortunately, we don't have any materials on this. But either one of these two formats would work. Download, drag and drop it right into your comp, or you file import, works great. Now, another option that I like to point out is Adobe Stock. So if you go to Adobe Stock and you tap on 3D here or click on it, and you do a search for 3D, look at all these 3D models. There's tons of 3D models in here. And the cool thing about this is, these models are textured. So for example, let's say I'm doing some kind of spot on, I don't know, cowboy stuff. I don't know why I would do that, but cowboy stuff. And I have this cowboy hat here. Well, I could download this guy, and you can see that this actually has like a leather material and things like that applied to it. So when this comes into After Effects, it's going to come in as the model. Now, let's take a look here. One of the things I'll bring to your attention is that this file type here is OBJ. So what you would want to do here, and we have a tool, and let me just bring it up here. This is called Substance Viewer. So Substance Viewer is a new tool. It's in beta. It's free to use. But in the case here of this cowboy hat, if I downloaded it, I could drag and drop it here into Substance Viewer with the textures. Here, let me just open something in Viewer so you can see it really quick. The reason I'm bringing this up is because you can use Viewer to convert to the 3D model format that you would use in After Effects. So this is just good to know in case you want to use any type of 3D models that you're getting, not just from stock, but any other, like maybe it's Turbo Squid or somewhere else. But basically, like I said, you really need to, in order to have the materials applied in After Effects, you need to have that GLB. So let's say I downloaded the cowboy hat, it came in OBJ, I see some textures. You can just go up here to File, and you would choose Export Scene. And then from the Export Scene, you would choose GLB as the format. And now you'd have the 3D model that you could bring into After Effects. All right, speaking of, let's jump back over to our buddy After Effects here. So as I was saying, we can rotate, move around, kind of play around here in the viewport. Now, something else that you can do here in the viewport is, I like to do this, is I'll split this into two views, right? So now we have an active view on the left and then, well, another view on the right, but it says left. It's talking about the direction here. So what's cool is I can view this from, say, the top view, and I can zoom in on it as well. So here's a top view of my phone, and then here's a perspective view, as you can see here. So I have two views. This is super helpful, especially when you're trying to like frame up shots or things like that. So just want to keep an eye on, what you're actually working with in 3D space. And there's lots of options here for this. So you click, you get these little blue triangles around the outside, and then you can change and set up different views here. So speaking of views, one of the things I would want to do right off the bat would be to come over here to Layer and create a new camera. Because I'm working in 3D, I need to have a camera so I can look through and view what I'm working with. So you'd set a camera, and you'll notice that my active camera view changed. So if we select this viewport and I jump over to the dropdown, you can see that it automatically sets the active camera to be camera 1. Okay, and you can have multiple cameras, multiple views, but this is what we're going to work with. So the way I like to do this is I'm going to use here my left view to frame up a shot. So let's say I'm working on this shot, and then my right view, you can see that I now have, and I can just left click to select 3D objects here. I have my phone, and then I can also just left click here, and now I have my camera. Okay, so I can move these things around. And let's say that I jump over to say something like my front view, and I want to just move the camera, I can do so here as well. And there is a shortcut here. If you're using, I'm on Mac, so it's Command, but I think it's Alt on PC. So if I hold down Command or Alt, or is it Control? I can't remember switching the keyboard shortcuts. But if you hold down, I'm just going to say Mac keyboard shortcut, Command left click on the Y-axis, I can now, rotate or orbit around this nice kind of origin point here that's on the 2-point focus for the camera. So pretty nice way to navigate. So that's just some basic navigation here. That's the number one thing you need to be able to see what you're doing here in 3D space. Okay, so we got our views. What else can we do here? If you select the 3D object, and here, let's take this over to maybe a top view so we can see this here. We'll go into our top view. You select the 3D object, you get this little transform manipulator here. And you have these little axis handles. So if I want to grab the handle and move this on the X-axis, I can do so. Or the Y-axis is going to be like up and down. And the Z, excuse me, is forward and backward. So again, it's really, really important, especially if you're new to 3D. You got to know, you got to be able to navigate where you are in 3D space. Now, another thing that's pretty cool, I'm actually using the After Effects beta, but one of the newer versions. So if we get any crashes, that's what's going on. But you can see here that we have the properties panel, which is context sensitive. So this panel is awesome. I love that they've improved it to where you can get lots of good information that you need, at the tip of your finger, basically, I guess you could say. You can see I have my anchor point, my position. So if I want to just move my position information here, I can do so just by changing things in the properties panel. But traditional After Effects, if you want to just drop down here, so let's say I'm in my layer stack, I hit the P key to bring up position. I can also rotate and move position here. This is where you can start keyframing things as well, right? So if I just hit my stopwatch, let's move this guy over to like 4 seconds and then do like a little move. And now you can see I've already created some animations. I'll hit the space bar. It's super, super slow, right? So let's move our keyframes a little closer together. Still doing a little RAM preview here, right? So, it works pretty quick. And we'll talk more about quality and speeding things up. And this is super, super boring what I'm doing here. Let's just move this guy over. But one of the other things I want to bring to your attention is, especially when you start working with 3D and you're, adding keyframes, and this is just one object, right? But what about when we get, more complex? There is a mode here that you can work with called Draft 3D, and this just turns on a fast 3D preview. It's awesome. So you turn on Draft 3D, and now this thing is super smooth and fast. This is great when you're trying to work up your timings and things like that in animation. So for example, I'm moving my phone here, and I've got these 2 keyframes. Maybe I want to drop over to my motion graph here, and you know what? For these 2 keyframes, let's drop back. We'll select these guys, add some easy ease to this. We can drop over to our graph editor. And then usually what I like to do is just keep it on the speed graph. So then I can just, kind of tweak some of these little keyframes here like this. But as you're working through, you can see that now we're starting to get, some nice fluid playback. Draft 3D is perfect for this, especially when you're, plotting down all the keyframes that you're going to be working with. All right, so for now, let's turn off that position information, and let's see, can I just zero this out, get it back? Nope, need to just undo this guy. So I'm just undoing to get everything back to the center here, and we'll turn off our keyframes. Okay, whoops, hit undo one too many times. All right, so again, this properties panel, and as you see, there's lots, it's like I said, it's context sensitive. So some other things that are really important for working with 3D, well, really any object inside of After Effects it'll come up with some extra information. Like for example, on this 3D object, I can disable cast shadows, accept lights, change shadow color. You'll see how I work into that in just a bit. Okay, so for now, we have one 3D object. Let's start adding another one. So I have this phone case that I've been working with here. So I'm going to drag and drop this phone case into the scene, and this guy comes in. Now, when you first drag in a 3D object or import a 3D object, you'll see a window that pops up, and I'll show you what that window looks like. Let's come over here to the hard case. So it's selected. I'm going to go to Layer, and I go to Model Settings, and this is what'll pop up. And it's the most important thing to know about is this setting here for object scale. So what it's going to do is it's going to say, hey, you brought in a 3D model. What scale do you want to do for this? And what I usually always do, well, I'll say always do, not usually, I just click Make Comp Size, and it'll try to adjust the scale of the object to basically the resolution proportions of your composition. Like in this case, this is a 1920 by 1080, so 1080p. Okay, so it'll try to do that. And you'll notice that for the hard case, it's got a scale of 200, and let's see. Whoops. See, I think I got a crash here. Let's see. Yep, no problem. Let's just run After Effects again. I told you that was probably going to happen. Okay, crash, repair options. Nope, just continue. We're good. I didn't do anything. It's you know what? It's because I'm streaming live. That's what it is. Because all jokes aside, like I was working with this like for the last 2 weeks recording this tutorial, and none of this happened. All right, let's open up my beach again. All right, it's coming into play. All right, so just getting back to where we were, like I said, I had the phone, and if we go to that model settings, so the phone, I hit Make Comp Sizes at 200, and then I'm working with this hard case, right? So we go in here and go Model Settings, and it's at 200. So, whoops, got another crash there. Let's see. Bear with me for just a second. Open this guy right back up. Worst case, we'll move over from the beta and get into the actual app. Alrighty, it's coming on. Okay, so here, let's do this. Let's just do composition. Let's do a new comp. We'll bring this guy into here. And then, like I said, I had my phone, and I'm going to bring in my hard case here. Okay, so kind of back where we were, right? And so these two objects are in zero, like they were all at the zero origin together. So that's all well and good, perfect. And you can see that they actually come in together. Now, if I wanted to reposition this, so I have the hard case, you can see that, I can even take the case and just, because I'm working in full 3D here, I can just place the case so that it's basically covering the phone, which is what I would want to do. And when I was first setting this up, one of the things that I did was I jump over here to my second layer, and we are going to set this mode to my top view. So we'll set this to top view, and here's where this becomes super, super handy because you can use these multiple views to kind of line up your 3D objects, make sure that they're all, set where they want to be in positional space and everything. So really good to work with that. All right, let's jump back to our single view, and now we have our two objects. So the one thing to keep in mind is that while you're in 3D, all of these layers are going to work pretty much like any other layer inside of After Effects. And there are a couple caveats, we'll get to that, but overall, like for example, let's say that I want to be able to animate this phone, but I want this case to show up or, go along for the ride, right? Well, it's super easy. All we have to do is just parent the hard case to the phone, and I do this using my pick whip. So I'm just going to go in and parent the hard case to the phone. So using pick whip. Now, I select the phone and I move. Of course, the case goes along for the ride now, which is great. And I can go in and I can just rotate this little case here, or excuse me, the phone, and now I've got my object. So the next thing I kind of want to mention to you is something with animation that's really cool here with 3D objects. So the 3D objects, you can see that I could easily animate if I wanted to do like rotation. We can look at that kind of stuff, but I can animate things. But 3D models can also have some animation embedded within them. And so it depends. Like you could do that in a third-party, like a 3D application, or maybe it's a 3D model that you received from a coworker or somewhere else, and they have some animation embedded. Now, this hard case does have animation embedded. I created it so I know that it actually has some animation to fold the case like you would normally fold a case. So to access that data, I just click my drop down and I go to animation options. Now, if a 3D object that you get, if it has animation data, that's when you'll see this animation options. So if I click this drop down, it's showing me some data here, and I know there's an animation clip. So as soon as I select that animation clip, I can see and I start to scrub. Check this out. Now I've got this embedded animation that's playing here, and you know what? I want it to go fast. Let's jump into Draft 3D. And check this out. I have my little animation here. Now, the layer duration is going to change based on how long the animation is. So what would happen is it plays, it does its thing, and then boom, it's gone, right? So I'll show you how we will work with this in just a second. But what's really cool about this is that it is working with this embedded animation, which is awesome. The other thing that I really was, thought this was so cool was look at the case. So the case... Yes, and you can do lots of animation in After Effects. We could parent objects, we could animate them, we could do all that. But in this particular case, this, phone case is actually using what's called a skin deformation. So inside of a 3D program, I actually created some joints or bones, they'll be called, and I attached a skin to it. So what you get is this really nice kind of folding effect. And what's awesome about that is that skinned animation is imported into After Effects, which is crazy to think about. Think about animated characters, things like that. You can do all that in here. You can access that data. And speaking of being able to access the data, let's take a look at what we can do with the layer. So for example, let's say that I have the phone and I want it to start here, right? So if I look at this guy and I'm looking at my time slider here, this is at right around 30 seconds, right? So with the layer selected, I'm going to jump over here to layer, and I'm going to go to time, and I'm going to enable time remapping on this layer. And then for my first keyframe here, so if I scroll this back, I'm just going to set this to like basically that 1 second. So now what happens is I have the case. It's going to start at that frame, and now it can move to the open position, okay, which is going to be the end of the animation. However, what's really cool about this is let's look at being able to do something like extend the keyframe, right? And then I'm going to extend my layer. So I'm basically not only positioning what frames I want to play, but I'm also retiming the animation. So again, watch this now. If we hit play, look how slow motion the case is opening now, okay? And what's awesome about that, it's not like, if you do a lot of editing in like say Premiere or something like that, you know how you have a video clip and then you want to slow it down and so, you don't have the frame, so you stretch it, it does frame blending and it looks kind of choppy. Well, that's not going to happen here in After Effects because After Effects can read all of that underlying keyframe data that's embedded in this animation, and all it's doing is just redistributing that data. So now I can get super slow motion effects, or on the flip side, let's take the keyframe and move it this way. Or we can flip this thing open, well, pretty fast. That's way too fast. But again, flip it open pretty quick. We can also go in and, of course, work with these keyframes, right? So if I wanted to maybe add a little bit of easy ease with this, I could do so. So flip the lid open. Let's say that another thing I love to do is, again, I'm right-clicking here, and I'm always on the speed graph. And let's just kind of tweak this little speed graph, right? So now this is going to open up faster, and then it kind of gives it a little bit of a whip, right? So bam, we can do something like that. So again, we can work with all this animation data that's right here inside of After Effects. And then, of course, if I want to slow it up, speed it down, it's just a matter of moving your keyframes around. Pretty awesome. Okay, so that is us talking about 3D models, how to import them, how to position them, how to navigate in the viewport, how to access animation data, all that kind of stuff. However, the next big thing that we need to discuss here is, and you know what? I'm going to go ahead and save this just in case we get another crash. So let's just save it so I can open this up really quick. All right, so the next thing we want to talk about is lighting, right? So the whole thing about 3D is lighting. Lighting is so vital and important. So let's jump into that. Now, you can see we have this default light that's happening here in the scene, okay? But let's add another light, or let's control our lighting. And so to do that, you're going to come over here to Layer, and I'm going to choose New Light. And now, when you're working with this new 3D renderer inside of After Effects, you're going to have, traditional light types that you've had in After Effects, like, parallel, spot point, and all that kind of stuff. But we also have the environment light now, which is new. So I'm going to set this over here to 100%, cast shadows enabled, and shadow darkness, just leave all that at default. And then I'll click OK. And so now this is going to add a light into my scene. So something's happened. It's kind of really hard to tell what's going on. So to help visualize this, you can see, well, I can tell you my viewport's slowing down a little bit. But to help kind of visualize what's going on here, let's add some controls to this light. So if I select the light, and again, I'm going to jump over to that really super important properties panel, because like I said, it's going to be context sensitive. So you get this really nice light options that are showing up here. Now, if you want to access this data, you could through the layer stack. So you could, expand, go to light options. You can control things like the intensity, things like that all through here. You can see it's rendering. It looks now the light intensity is really low. All this data is here, but it's so much easier to access through the properties panel. So that's what we're going to be working with. Okay, so next thing is we are going to look at how do we change this lighting. So what we're going to do is over here in my project, I have this image here, which is an HDR image. So it looks like this guy. Let's see, can I zoom this guy out? So this is a high dynamic range image. Now, Robert, my coworker and buddy, Robert, he shot this while he was on his vacation as well. So this is the beach. And basically, a high dynamic range image, in case you don't know, is a particular type of image that stores a very wide range of information in terms of pixel value. So for example, a normal image would be like 0 to 255 or 0 to 1. That's just sRGB value, but a high dynamic range value can go above 1. So for example, if we wanted to capture like something, I mean, you can't capture the light, the exact intensity of the sun, but think about like, the sun is obviously going to be super bright in the scene. A value of 1's not going to do it, so maybe it's really a value of 10, right? And you can use 3D programs and 3D renderers, and After Effects, our buddy here included, can take this HDR data and use that to light scenes. So that's what it all comes down to, right? So to use this, we're just going to take this EXR, drag it into the comp, and you'll see here that, boom, it shows up. Now, we'll select the light, and then I'll jump over here to source and just switch it to the new source. So now, when we do this, you'll see that we're starting to get new lighting information. And what's happening is this image, and if I turn it back on, let's see if it'll show up here. This HDR is basically, it's being wrapped inside. Think of it like the world that you're in. Like, say you were standing here on this beach, right? And you're a person standing on the beach, and you can look around, you can see the whole world, right? This is essentially what's happening here. You're taking this beach image, this HDR, and you're kind of mapping it around a world in After Effects. So in a sense, this becomes your world, right? And the lighting is coming from this image. So to work with this is going to bring us to another really important aspect of working with this information. Now, you'll see that as I do a move, there's more rendering. Things are slowing down. So again, you can always jump back to your draft 3D mode because that is going to disable shadows, and it's going to work pretty fast. So in 3D mode, if we go to our Y rotation, speaking of that environment, and I rotate the environment, so it's basically, think about the environment. It's wrapped around a sphere, and the sphere is just rotating like this, you know? And what that's doing is essentially just adjusting the lighting information or the light direction. But we don't see any shadows, right? So that's a problem. So if I turn Draft 3D off, now we've got this render issue. But that's going to take me to this setting here. So if you go to Advanced 3D Renderer, there's some render options, and we need to start talking about that. So when we bring up the Advanced 3D Render options, you can see there's a render quality set. And at a value of 10, that's a lot, okay? Now, this thing will go up, I mean, crazy amount. I'm not going to do it because hopefully it might crash, so I don't want to do that. So let's do something and make this really simple. Let's take the render quality down to, say, something like 2, okay? And so that's going to make my scene a little bit snappier. But in order for shadows, which I don't really see here on the object, we need to talk about this casting box size. So just so you can get an idea, I'm going to click this Fit to Scene button. And now, all of a sudden, you can see that there's this pink box that shows up around the scene. So what's happening is this box is where the shadow rays are being casted from. Okay, and so as soon as we encompass the box so that it's basically fitting to our scene, we're now starting to see some shadow fidelity showing up. Now, it's real noisy because my quality is set like super low, okay? And that's great. We're going to keep it low while we work, and then you would just bump the render up at the end when it's time to render your comp, just like you would do in, you know, a regular 3D program, right? And so this casting box is super vital because if you have it set to fit your scene correctly, you're able to get the shadows working or look like they're grounded. So I'm starting to see actual shadowing here, and you have the ability to set maybe a little bit of a lower quality, okay? So there's a trade-off there. Now, with this setup, let's just click OK, right? And if I now scrub, you can see, check this out. I now have some shadowing here. Look at the shadow that's showing up here. Pretty awesome. And if I want to go back to my light source, it's got selected here, and I rotate my light, I can change the lighting direction just as we did earlier, right? So this is something we want to work with. But now you'll notice with that render quality lower, this thing is moving so much faster now, which is great. This is what I want to do. Okay, here, let me just reposition my camera once again. Something like this. Okay, so again, we got our little rotation or the animation. Something else that's going on here in After Effects in terms of quality is there is an option right here for fast previews. So if I click this drop down, so it's off right now. Now, what I'd like to do is turn this on adaptive resolution. So what this is going to do, and this is really nice, is that it'll give me a real kind of pixelated kind of, you know, again, adaptive resolution. You can see it's up here, the rendering quality, what it's telling me. And then as soon as I let go of my mouse, it'll do a quick render. So that's good that it's going to go in and do that for me, right? So here, I'll just frame up my shot. Here, let's grab my phone case and just kind of rotate it slightly, get something like that. And now, as I play, and I could even try to hit play and see what this does in my RAM preview. Okay, so it's still pretty low, but it would just need to RAM preview out. But again, if I was doing animation and testing, you know, keyframes, I would jump myself into Draft 3D. But as soon as we do that, just recall, you can still see your lighting, but you're going to lose those shadows. But no problem if you're just setting up keyframes. Okay, So now we have our shadow in here. Let's take a look at some more options with this. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to layer and choose new, and I'm going to create a new solid. And we're going to call this, I don't know what, how about just gray solid? That looks good. And we're going to leave it gray, and notice that it's at the width and height of my comp. So I'll click OK in here, and it creates a solid. Now, what I'd like to do is maybe create some type of ground plane or something like that with this. So with this gray solid in place, I'm going to come over here to this little section. And here, I think I can zoom in on this. Let's see if that works. There is a little toggle button here underneath this little cube where I can enable this as a 3D layer. So I'm going to enable that and then zoom back out. And now I have this ground plane. And let's jump over here to a second view. So let's move this guy over. Let's jump over to a second view so we can see what's happening here. And let's look at this from like maybe a left view. Okay, so now you can see that I have my plane, and let's move the plane back in 3D space. So we'll do something like this, okay? So if we start to scrub our timeline here, let's get our little animation to kind of open up. We'll get something like that. I can see the ground plane's a little close. Let's just move it slightly back. But now this is starting to cast shadow in my scene. So one thing I want to bring to your attention, let's jump back to our buddy here, the casting box. So we'll go in and set that to our fit to scene again. Oops, I made a mistake. All right, this is a good mistake though. So you'll notice how I hit fit to scene and now the casting box is gone. Well, one of the issues that I made there was casting box, when it says fit to scene, it's going to take a look at all of the layers that are visible in your layer stack, and it's going to use that to determine how big the box should be. And you might think, oh, well, just do that, right? You'll never have an issue. But you get this weird quality trade-off. So now the box is really big, and the rays that are shooting from that box have to do so in a much larger area. So the way to kind of look at that is that box is going to be it's going to make like what's called a voxel grid. So imagine a box that has little tiny boxes in it, right? And it fills all the way up. And each little tiny box is where the ray is getting casted from. Don't worry about all the technical stuff. I'm just kind of throwing it out there. If it doesn't make any sense, don't worry about it. You don't need to know it. But like the fidelity of that grid. So if you were to increase the render quality, think about the boxes inside the main box getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which means you have more rays that are getting shot and the fidelity looks a lot better, but your render time's out the roof. So you don't want that. So what you need to do, and this is kind of the trick, is I'm like, okay, I don't really care about this background that I just added, this background. So I don't care about that thing casting shadows. So I'm going to just turn that off visibility-wise. Now, the only thing I do care about being able to cast shadows is the phone and the case. So those are my only visible items. Now is when I would jump over to my render options, and now you can see the fit to box is here. So what I'm saying is I'm taking that box and I'm concentrating all of the good render quality that I need into the very specific area, and that allows me to set my render quality maybe a little lower than if it was encompassing the entire scene. I'd have to set the render quality super high for that to work, right? So it's a nice trade-off, kind of a way to get things nice and snappy. All right, so one thing though, everything that's outside of this box, it will not cast a shadow. However, it can receive a shadow. So take note, the box is encompassing just the phone in the case, right? But if I turn back on my environment, hey, it's still receiving a shadow. It's just not casting one, which is perfect. All right, so now our scene, and if we look at it this way, long story short, that explanation is that we now have a really nice optimized scene for working in 3D and After Effects. Now, everything's super grainy in here, right? But that's okay. I'm not too worried about it right now because I can always up the render quality when I need to. Right now is just I'm basically blocking everything in, and I'm working on my shot and stuff like that. So I'm just kind of getting an idea of what I want to do. I don't really care how it looks right now. I only care how it looks in the end, right? So this is set up. Now, something else you could do, right? So let's say that I want to be able to move the camera around in the scene, okay? So let's see. Let's go back here to my camera. Where is my, you know what? I think I lost my camera here in the scene. I did. Let's go to Layer, New, Camera. I forgot to add it back. Okay, there's my camera. Now, we're going to zoom into the scene. I'm going to frame up a little shot here. Let's see. Sometimes I get a little bit of issue with moving my camera around like this. No problem. We're just going to go into our second view. and now just grab the camera like this, okay? And let's jump over here to my top view. I think there's keyboard shortcuts to switch to these views. I've never taken time to learn them. If you do know them, throw them in the chat. It would be great. But yeah, like I said, I never have taken time to use them. Here's where I'm going to hold down my command key and left click on the axis to rotate. Well, my little focus point's way out here. Let me just move it so it's on the phone. And then command, left click, drag, get something like that. Let's push it in. Whoops. Again, holding down my command key. All right, and then I'm just going to bust over here to my left view. All right, just framing up my shot here. Okay, but, you know, let's just say that if I'm moving the camera around a lot. So here, if we go to our top view, and let's say that we were rotating the camera. Yes, I know that. Now, look, oh, shoot, it's showing the background, right? So now I need to make this plane, like, super large. Well, a trick that I like to use for this, especially, it's great if you're just doing kind of like little product-y type shots like this, right? So let me save again just in case. What I'm going to do is come over here to my composition settings. So where is that? My composition settings. And let's just make a background, right? So let's say that, I don't know what kind of background we would make. Kind of bad at picking colors like right on the spot. But I don't know, we'll say we'll do something like this little blue here. Got a little crash there. No problem. We can fix it real quick. Like I said, I'm using a beta version of After Effects, so it's giving me a little bit of an issue. No problem though. We'll get it right back up here in just a second. Good thing I saved the scene right beforehand though. All right, so File. All right, there's After Effects. File, open recent. I think it's just saving these auto saves for me from the crash, but I've been saving my beach scene, so I'm just going to use this. All right, we're back. All right, so like I said, what I could do is if I go to my comp settings, let's just change this color. Get something like maybe this, I guess. Okay. So we want to just see the background, but here's something cool we can do. So with the layer selected here, this is, again, that background layer. And I can jump over to my properties. It just makes it a little bit easier. Oh, actually, here, they're not in the properties in this particular case. Okay, well, here's a good showcase for this. We're going to expand our properties and go to our material options. And underneath here, there's a bunch of options, like you can enable and disable. Hey, does this thing cast? Does it receive shadows? Again, it's cast shadows is on, but recall, because it's outside the bounding box, it's not actually going to cast the shadows. But the thing that I'm really interested in here is this accept shadows, okay? And it says on, but there's a mode. If I click this, I could set it to only. So now this becomes a shadow catcher, really great for having like a ground plane. So now if I go in and I'm kind of rotating and moving my camera around, it doesn't matter how I rotate this thing. Look, I can go just crazy like oblique angles here. And now that plane is just acting as though it's a shadow catcher, which is super cool, right? And I use this technique a lot, and we're also going to use it here in our main scene, which I'm going to switch to in just a second. But this becomes like a really great way to kind of, if you have to just have like a shadow catch, something like that for the ground. So at this point, we've kind of talked all about, just some really basics of 3D and how it works inside of After Effects. Like I said, I have a course that's going to go live here pretty soon. It's going to be on the adobevideotraining.com site or also on my YouTube channel. And it goes through this entire course step by step. And so you'll have a whole course that you can watch there on that. And I also have a course that goes along with that video that shows how this phone was completely textured. If we have enough time, we can take a quick peek at that in Substance Painter. But for now, let's jump over to some of these other comps, right? So I'm going to jump into this track. So this is the footage that came from my buddy Robert. And if we look at the 3D track, so I brought this footage in and I just ran a 3D track here in the scene. And you can see I have all my tracking points. And what I want to do is I just wanted to add the phone so that it's basically in this area. So what I'll do is I'll just left click and drag and just select several of these points. And you can see that averages out where this target area is going to be. So this is actually looking pretty good. One thing you can do is if you want to reposition this, you can left click on the target and kind of move this as well. Let's see if I can get it. Yeah, I can reposition this as well. But you know what? This is exactly where I want this phone to be. So what you would do in this case is you would just right click And first things first, I would set this ground plane in origin. So it'll kind of set that. And then I'm going to right click again. And here's where I would create within the scene here. Let's see, there's a couple options. You could create text and camera, solid and camera. Let's see, I'm going to create a null and a camera. So it creates a camera, and then I have my little track null here. And this is now in place and tracking along with my scene. So what's cool here is if I take something like, say, the phone, and I'm going to drag and drop the phone into the scene. So it's going to come in. It's way off in the distance, right? Or actually, I don't know where it is. But here's the trick to get this to align up. This is what I like to do. So first thing I'm going to do is take the phone, and I'm going to parent it using my pick whip to the track null, okay? And then I'm going to expand my position here. And my position is right here. And I just zero this out, 0, 0, 0. And that puts my phone right on the track. So now what I could do, again, with the phone selected, I'm switching gears. I'm up here. Sorry to keep moving my mouse around so much, but I like to use this little properties panel when the data's here. So I'm going to scale this guy up, the phone. So now I can scale it. And I can rotate it. Now, here's a good point. You can see that it's rotating from the center point of the 3D model. And if you were in your 3D program and you set what's called a pivot point, which is basically going to be the point through which the transformations take place, that pivot setting will retain inside of After Effects. However, I was lazy. I didn't do it. But once you're in After Effects, you could set the anchor point here. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm just going to reposition. And here's a good way to do that. If we jump over to our second view, let's go into our top view right here. Now we can see our top view, right? Let's grab that anchor point, and I'm going to move it on the Y. Let's see. Whoops. Select the phone here. Not on the Y, excuse me, on the Z. And you can see that I can set the little anchor point so that it's right here at the base of the phone. That's what I want to do. And this is going to give me a really nice little pivot point, right? So now if I rotate, look at this, I can rotate right from the phone. Pretty cool. All right, so let's just do a quick little rotation on this guy. And then I continue to scale it up. It looks too big probably for the scene, but I don't know. Sometimes there's some really cool clips and videos where you have like some kind of like object that looks ridiculously large in the scene, kind of fun. But now as I scrub, you can see that the phone is perfectly in 3D tracked here to the scene, which is awesome. So that's working. Okay, so that's as simple as it was. Now the next thing that I did, let me jump over here to my actual beach scene itself. So we're gonna jump in here to beach, so I can kind of break this down a little bit more. So first things first, what I did was, is I had the phone, I did just what I showed you guys. I had the phone, I set the anchor point, I took the case itself, which is right here, and that's parented to the phone. You can see it, if I zoom in on it, you can see it's parented to the phone, again, using the pick whip. And that's allowed me to set everything up. And then I did the animation that I kind of showed so that animation would go through. Now, if you look at the shadow that's on the ground, check this out. If we go to the shadow catcher, and let's turn off the shadows here for a second. So we'll drop this down. Let's go to that material options. Cast shadows, you can see it's set to only. Let's set it to, let's see, off or on, we'll say. And what I did was I took just that ground plane solid and just applied it here to the ground, positioned it or anchored it to the null. You can see that it's actually parented to the null. And then I just set those accept shadows to only. So now I get like this cool like shadow catcher. Perfect for that scene. And so that's all that's doing here. Now, the next thing that I wanted to talk about was how do you do this phone replacement or this screen replacement? This is actually pretty neat. So what I did was I jumped over to my comp. Let's see. Let's do this. Right here in the scene, I had my phone, right? And you'll see there is a layer here called screen replacement. So if we just kind of solo out the screen replacement and the phone, okay? And let's set this from active camera to just default. So I'm just changing my view, right? And we're going to set this into my draft 3D mode so I can see what everything is doing. So here's what I did. I started off by just creating a layer, new, solid, and it came in. I set that solid to be in 3D space, and then I just moved the solid in 3D space, you can see like this, until it encompassed or it was inside the phone, because I can this is a 3D object now, and the phone has a glass layer. You can kind of see it if I can get it. Has a little glass layer that's transparent, and I just place the solid just by eyeballing it like this into the 3D comp. So once that was done, I then, let me just undo because I kind of messed up my scene there, I think. But once that was done, I then went into my top view. Let's see if I can go to my top view. Well, it's going to be off right now because it's rotated. But before I rotated it, I went into my top view. And for that screen replacement, you can see that I have a mask. And then it's right here. I just did a quick mask around to mask that out. And then I selected the comp and did a pre-compose. So the pre-compose looks like this. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, this is super important, was that for the comp settings for this guy, if I go to my composition settings, I just kind of worked up that the width and height should be around an aspect ratio of 0.45, so 380 by 840. And the way that I did that, and there's probably a better way to do it, but I just went and added my rulers, looked at this from my top view, and then just measured it. I was like, oh, okay, it's that many pixels, right? So if we jump back into here, I then just had a layer that I got. So again, Robert, he made he had this PSD file, and like I was telling you guys, I did me and Rob did the Max keynote session last year. So we kind of mock this up as funny, hey, it's our keynote session. But you can just throw these guys into here. And so I have one layer, and then another thing that I had in here was for the blending mode for this guy, I set it to be it's on screen. So let me move this guy over here. So I set it to like screen mode, so it gives it a little bit of this brightness like this. And then the next thing that I did, though, was if you go over, and I love this effect, this capability in After Effects. So I quickly added Essential Graphics, right? And I just took this screen and just did a drag and drop so it was added into my Essential Graphics screen, which was what I wanted to do here, so that I can replace this in the actual scene itself. So again, if we jump back here to beach, you can see that I now have this little screen replacement. So if I wanted to take something like this beach final movie and drag it right here, it'll give me I can actually play video on this. So if I scrub my timeline, you can see I'm playing video right here on this, which is really, really cool, right? And I'm just going to leave it like that. Well, here, let's undo it. Okay, so that's how I did the screen. One more thing that's super important with the screen replacement. There's an option here in material options. My accept lights, set it to off. And now it's going to work where it looks like it's an illuminated screen. It's a great little tip. Okay, so let's come over here and just unsolo everything. And now we have our scene back. And if we take a look, let's see, we'll go out of draft mode here. We now have our scene in place. And like I said, I think this render options is set really high on my render quality. Let's just set it down so I can scrub through this a little bit more quickly. Okay, there we go. And like I said, I think I screwed something up in my project here. Let's see if I can undo that really quick without a crash. Yeah, we won't worry about it. Okay, so we'll say this guy's in place here. Now, the next thing that I kind of wanted to showcase was, like I said, guys, I'm sorry about this. I totally screwed up my scene, but yeah, no problem. We're almost time anyways. So one other thing that I wanted to showcase here is if I jump over here to my depth of field scene, which is going to be completely broken, but I wanted to show you how we can, or hopefully it's working here. One of the things that I was able to do here is you can come over here to the comp itself. And if I go to my effects controls on this guy, so if I select here the comp, one of the things that you can do for the 3D scene, so here, let's enable this guy so we can see it. And we look at our comp. Let's see, it should be my effects controls here. You can come over here to effects and presets, and under 3D channel, you can grab a 3D channel extract. And you drag and drop this in, and it will extrapolate out the depth information from the scene, from the 3D scene, which then is perfect to do things like, add a lens blur. So that's all I did. So here you can see I have my camera lens blur on top, and I have my depth map is set to the actual depth layer, and that's how I can quickly add some depth of field to the 3D scene for here. And one other thing, too, you'll notice is I have some text coming into play here. Well, if I jump back over to my scene, there's one thing I want to showcase here for this guy is if we come over here and we add something like, say, some text, and we'll just give it like just a value like this, and we'll just scale the text up. Let's see if it's coming in. So the text just in the scene. One thing I want to mention here, though, is that if we look at our scene here in 3D, notice that we have this little box that's around all of the 3D elements, and that's called the 3D bin. And After Effects is doing something pretty complex where it's doing like it can actually have separate rendering bins within a scene. So right now we have one render bin that's mixing itself not just with 3D, but also any kind of 2D layers. However, if I take, let's say I want this text to be behind, it's a 2D layer, and I want the text to be behind the phone. Well, if I drag and drop this to say, oh, let's just place it behind the phone, notice what'll happen. Okay, it's going to break things. So if I zoom in really quick, I can see that it's doing something really odd in here, right? It's starting to break something. So let's send it behind the hard case. Okay, so as soon as I do that, you can see that it starts to act, it can act funny depending on where this guy is going into the scene. Okay, so for example, right here, if I place it and I tried to place it in front of the actual background, well, now it's broken the bin. So now there's two render bins. So think of it as like, okay, this first bin is going to render, the second bin is going to render, but they're separated. So you lose the capability to cast the shadows. So when things like that happen, you have to just be careful over where you're putting 3D objects in your scene. So for example, I can say, or 2D layers. So for example, just lowering it below everything works, except I just can't set it in the middle of the bin because it's going to break everything at that point. Okay, and then one last thing that we'll talk about really quick is, well, you know, how do I apply effects to 3D models, right? That was a fundamental thing that I forgot to cover. But again, like I said, it's covered in the course, is you can't apply effects directly to a 3D model itself. So for example, if I wanted to grab like a hue saturation or something, I can't apply it right on the 3D model. So let's take the phone case itself and, let's see, let's just turn off everything else and we'll just have the hard case here. Now, one thing that I could do is just pre-compose the 3D layer, of course, but another thing we could do is you could come into here and you could add an adjustment layer, which would work. So adjustment layer over all the layers, that'll work. However, that would affect everything in the comp. So a quick thing that I can do would be to add a solid, and I'm going to call it effects, and it's going to be here. I usually throw this at the very top. And I'm going to come into here and I'm going to add a CC composite. You could also use calculations for this, but CC composite's pretty quick. So the top layer is going to be, we just set it to say the hard case, right? So now I've got my hard case and I'm going to set this just to be copy. Okay, so now it's just giving me just the hard case with the transparency behind it. But what's really cool about this is think of it like this. I have a 3D model. And it's basically, I like to think of it like I'm flattening it, right? Or merging it into a 2D layer up here. Now, with this 2D layer, like if I grab, again, that hue, I can drag this guy in. And now I can start to kind of play around with the coloring here. So say I wanted to change the coloring of the 3D object, I can, but I still have the capability to select the 3D object itself and move it around. So it's a pretty cool way of working like that. So that is going to basically cover a lot of the kind of the 3D aspects that I wanted to showcase in this actual course here. And so here, let's come over to our ending point here. And so again, I just want to thank everybody for joining me on this quick little adventure of 3D in After Effects. There's a lot to cover. We did go over most of the basics, took a look at how we could, you know, put a phone into some track footage, things like that. But like I said, I just want to remind you that I have a course coming out. It's going to be on adobevideotraining.com. Goes through this entire thing, building the scene from scratch, step by step. So also too, I'm just going to bring to your attention up here at the top of the bar. I think I can, there's some socials here, but my YouTube channel, wait, it's on this side. I think you can, find the link here. And then on Instagram, I'm constantly showing tips, tricks, and things like that around just basically all things in kind of 3D, around After Effects, just different tools and things like that. So again, I just want to thank everyone for joining me on this episode of 3D Espresso. I hope you enjoyed the time here. We've got lots of future episodes. Let me know if you just want to hit me up on socials, if there's anything super particular you'd like me to cover in a future episode. Some of my awesome coworkers on the Creative 3D team, they're going to have some really neat things that they're going to show as well. So anyways, be on the lookout for our next episode of 3D Espresso. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.